There you go.
Great. Got it. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
I'm good. You have something exciting to share. I can't wait to hear.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I told you or not. Last month I went to the UK.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yes. I think you posted some pictures.
Oh, that's right. Okay, good. Yeah, so I went to the UK, and so when I decided to go to England, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be good to do some speaking here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thought I had was, well, you don't know anybody in England. How can you do that? You know? So at any rate, what I did was I visited my future self, because this is what I believe, right? That I mean, you've got my book and you understand it, or you've read it, I think. And so, the idea is that thinking is a connection. So when I think of the past, what we call memory, then I'm connected to the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
That particular past. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of possible pasts, but I'm connected. So memory is a connection to the past, and setting a goal makes a connection to the future.
Right.
So what I did was I visited myself in the future doing this talk. And I said, well, how did I get here? How did I set this up? Right? Because when I'm in the future, I can remember me setting the goal. Right?
Right.
Because it's a connection,
Yeah.
So I said, okay, how did I do this? So the answer I got back was, well, I sent an email to a bunch of positive thinking groups in the UK and asked them if they wanted me to talk to their people. Nice. And one of them said yes. So I thought, hey, that's a good idea. So that's what I did, right? And one of them said yes. So I got an invitation to do this talk on the 2nd of May in a place called Bournemouth, which I had never heard of, but it turns out it's a beautiful little place on the English Channel, south of London. It's on the coast. It's got a beautiful big beach, and that whole area around there is all beach resorts, right? Mm-hmm. And a beautiful little place. So I talked there. I, did my little thing on the 2nd of May. And when I was there, I told the people that I was speaking to about this. I said, your mind is a connection. Your mind is a time machine. A little while ago, I was in Victoria talking about being in Bournemouth. Now here I am in Bournemouth. I'm talking about being in Victoria, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a connection there, right? It's just the same thing that happens every time you go to the store to buy a loaf of bread. You're sitting home and you think, oh, geez, I need some bread, So I'll pick up a loaf of bread on the way home. So that's your plan, right? Mm-hmm. That's your plan. So you might even see yourself driving home and stopping in at the store to buy the bread. So now when you're in the store buying the bread, you can remember being home thinking, hey, I got to buy some bread, right? Mm-hmm. So all these connections are kind of, going on all the time, right? Yeah. So so I thought, well, I'm going to use this trip to England as a demonstration of how you can create one of your dreams, one of your goals, right? So that was how I was framing it. That's how I was thinking about it, right? And so since I came back, because I started a series of live Q&A calls on Saturdays in early January last year. I think the first Saturday in January. And so the idea was to help people understand my book, and this whole idea that your mind is powerful, and when you have a thought, you can create it, right? Yeah. So, and I remember thinking, I think if I do 13 sessions, I'll be able to say everything I want to say about how this works, about my theory of, your mind is a time machine, thoughts are real forces, you can create your dreams as physical events, right? Yeah. I thought if I do 13 sessions, I should be able to cover everything. Well, we just recorded number 76.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And people are slowly starting to get it,
Uh-huh.
And so when I first started these calls, I thought, 13 sessions should be enough. I should be able to explain everything, right? But what I forgot was that I spent 20 years figuring this out.
Yeah.
And when I had it figured out, I spent another 15 years putting it into a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent altogether, you might say, 35 years working on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I had forgotten, that it's not just, oh, I get it,
Right.
It can be a little tricky because it's a new paradigm and we have to kind of change our beliefs, change our attitudes,
Right.
change what we think of, So, so what I've been doing for the last, 3 or 4 sessions since I came back, I've been talking about that trip to Bournemouth and how it's a manifestation of taking a dream and making it real. And so it's a demonstration of what I believe the physicists, the scientists, the most intelligent people in the world that are studying quantum mechanics and relativity physics, how they describe the physical world, right?
Mm.
And so they're trying to put together a theory of everything, they call it, right? It's a combination of the science of the really small, which is quantum physics,
Mhm.
and the science of the really big, which is relativity physics, which is about the universe and the stars and faster than light travel and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So they're trying to put these two together, but up until now, they haven't managed to figure it out yet. But I think that the piece they're missing is consciousness. Because to me, when you put together quantum mechanics and relativity physics, what you come up with is a theory of how the mind works. This is how I see it. So the way that I understand it, and this is what my book is about, that, physics describes how consciousness works, right? So the last few weeks, I've been talking about this on these Saturday calls. And as a matter of fact, I just uploaded the most recent episode in which I talk about quantum mechanics and relativity physics and how it relates to thinking, right?
Okay.
And so that's what I was so excited about. But when I was thinking about you this morning, I thought, you're an artist.
I guess so.
So you paint pictures, right?
Yeah. I just started.
Yeah. So what you do is you come up with an idea and you create it, and then you end up with a physical representation of your thoughts.
Right.
Is that not true?
That is true. You're right.
Well, that's what I do when I go to the store to buy a loaf of bread.
Mm.
And that's what I did when I went to England. Now, of course, the difference is people don't normally think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
So in my book, the first thing I talk about, I think on the first couple of pages, is that if my mind is so powerful, how come I can't get what I want easily and quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And how come I have all these troubles and all these problems? And of course, the answer is because we have 50,000 thoughts a day and we're hardly conscious of any of them.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are creative, but the trick is to become aware enough so that we can channel the thoughts that we want and work with the thoughts that we want and kind of dismiss the ones that we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, when I first had that thought, I can remember having that thought, hey, wouldn't it be neat to do some speaking in England when I go there?
Yeah.
And my first thought was, that's going to be too difficult. Forget it. That'll just make you frustrated trying to set that up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the people that I talked to on Saturday, who's in this Saturday group on a regular basis, he calls this playing badminton with your thoughts, And they get to go bonk,
Yep.
batted away. So the next thought I had was, how much fun would it be to do that? And I thought, wow, that would be so. I mean, it changed my feelings right away. I thought that would be so much fun to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as I felt that, then I was motivated to do it. So I asked my future self, how did you do it? Well, this is what I did, right? Because in the entire universe, all of the possible past, possible futures, possible Anthonys, possible Jodys, all of those possible realities that the scientists now are telling us exist, right? There's only one that knows how I set that talk up in, and that's future Anthony Hamilton that was speaking in Bournemouth on the 2nd of May. So I asked that person, who I call my future self, how did you do this? How did you set this up? And the answer was, well, I sent an email. So that's exactly what I did. I crafted an email. I went to Google, talked to my friend Google, positive thinking groups in the UK, found about 50 people that have some kind of positive thinking group or whatever. And, I wrote to them and said, hey, I'm coming to England and this is me. I'm an author and I talk about the power of the mind and that sort of thing. And would you be interested in having me come and talk to your group? Well, one of them said yes.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I thought, oh, great. And as soon as I got that yes from that person, then, everything changed, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just a thought anymore. It wasn't just like an idea, some fanciful idea. Now suddenly it became a goal, right? So a goal has a different kind of energy to it, because a goal is, to my mind, a goal is a possibility that you've decided to experience. So there's a decision there. It's like, when I think about going to the store to buy a loaf of bread, if I don't follow up with that, I'm never going to buy any bread,
Right.
But if I say, okay, yes, I need the bread, so I'm Tuesday when I come back from work, I have to go buy this Italian bakery that I really like. So I'll go in there and I'll buy a loaf of bread. So that's my plan then, right? So as soon as I connected with these people in Bournemouth and we had a Zoom call like this, and they said, yeah, we'd love to have you come. We did a little Googling of your book and your website and everything, So yeah, we'd love to have you come. So as soon as that happened, then it was like, okay, now it's starting to become real, right? So then the whole thing changed. Now it became just a goal, like buying a loaf of bread, only it became, okay, I need to make a reservation for a hotel in Bournemouth. I need to figure out where Bournemouth is. How do I get there? I'm going to be in London. How do I get from London to Bournemouth? And what time are the trains? And how much are the tickets? And it just became, like any other goal that you reach.
Right.
So, but I finally put that talk together. I just finished editing it this morning and I put it up on YouTube. And so when I started a year ago with these live Q&A calls, this is what I envision the calls to be about. And what I've found over the last, 76 weeks is that it takes a while for people to get it. Yeah. Because we don't usually think of our thoughts this way, right? But it's perfectly in tune with quantum physics and relativity physics. So this is what I was
Oh my gosh,
uploading to YouTube today.
This is so, there are no coincidences. I mean, everything is coincidental. It happens because it needs to happen that way. I did a Facebook Live today on my Facebook page about some things that I had some ahas about. And it's energetic. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but I've been contemplating this quote by Deepak Chopra that says, imagine your ideal future. Right now, close your eyes and imagine your ideal future. Now take the memory of that future and bring it back to the present time and allow it to guide how you are from now forward. It's the same kind of thing you're talking about right now. There are so many ideas, external circumstances coinciding right now. The fact that you reached out with this is so much validation for me about the things I've been thinking about too, but not nearly as articulate as you are in putting it together. I don't quite have 35 years of studying this yet, but we can fast track when we work together.
Well, I had this dream when I was 10, right? When
I
saw the future in advance.
Yeah.
And it's taken me this long to figure it out and how it works and understand it, and then trying to explain it to people. And part of the problem is that I had to create a whole new language, which I use in my book, to describe this experience I had and how I understand it. Because, if I say to you, think of a dog, right? You go, yeah, I can think of a dog, no problem. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
So I say, okay, describe the dog. You describe the dog, and I say, no, that's not the dog I'm thinking of.
Right.
Oh, okay. So you think of another one. No, that's not it. No, that's not. Think of another one. Well, you could go for a year.
Yeah.
And you could never figure out the dog I'm thinking of because I'm thinking of my specific dog, right? So that's true for every word we could say, like certainly every noun, right? Like if I say think of a car, same thing, So the problem is, until now, we haven't had any way of describing what we're doing when we think. Like, we use the word think for memory, ambition, goal, fantasy, fear, worry, And people like Deepak Chopra have been writing books for years trying to explain to people, change your thinking, change your life. And people don't get it because they don't know what he's thinking about.
Right.
So when I wrote my book, I put a diagram in there. I think it's in chapter 10. And it's called A Map of Inner Space-Time. And you might remember that.
Yep.
I think I have my book right here. Can you hold on just 1 second? I'll just go.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. This is so fun.
Here's the book, Mind, Time, and Power, which you have your own copy of, I know.
Yep, I sure do.
So in chapter 10, I talk about this map of inner space-time, right? Which to me is the thing I'm most proud of because it explains what thinking is, right? And so here it is here. So this is a map, if you can see it, right? Now you have this.
There you go.
So here's the map. This is the map of inner space-time, right? So what that shows is that every thought you have is a virtual reality, right? Like that loaf of bread, or like that painting that you're going to paint. You say, okay, I'm going to paint this painting, right? And you might draw it out. You might have some ideas about it. And then you can create your painting, right? The same as I created this trip to England and speaking in Bournemouth, right?
Yeah.
And so, but until I came up with that map of inner space-time, I didn't have any way to talk about what a thought is, right? But now I do. I can say, hey, it's on this map. It's right here. It's I call it a possible virtual reality in the negative future.
Okay.
That's something I'm afraid of, right?
Yeah.
The goal is a virtual reality in the positive future. That's a goal. It's positive. It's something I want, right? So likewise, a virtual reality in the past might be something that I wanted to do and wasn't able to do it. And so that's just an example. So having that language of saying, okay, it's every thought is a virtual reality. And like when I first thought about going to England, I just had a couple of pictures in my mind about what it was. I wanted to go here, I wanted to go there, wanted to go to London, wanted to go to Westminster Abbey and that sort of thing. So your imagination is the connection. That's how I look at it. That's what I say in my book. It's kind of like the connection that you and I have right now between my computer and your phone, right?
Yeah.
We're obviously connected, and the information goes back and forth. You can see me, I can see you. You can ask me questions, I can answer. I can ask you questions, you can answer me. So there's this information energy going back and forth. Well, that's what happens whenever we have a goal, whenever we have a thought, right? And of course, if we add energy to it that's negative, like, ooh, that would be scary to do that, then we don't do it.
Right.
Would you like to would you like to stand up and give a little talk at my wedding? Oh, no. I'm not a good public speaker, so we don't do it, right? But we could do it if we wanted to. So anyway, so that was very exciting to take this trip, create this experience, follow through, do the talk. And now I have a whole new set of friends and connections in the
Oh, so good. So good. So tell me more about this 76-week Q&A. Is it still going?
Yeah, we do it live every Saturday. We do it 10 o'clock Vancouver time, or San Francisco time. It's Pacific time.
Yeah.
And all people have to do is just go to my website, mindtimeandpower.com, and click on the link to the community, and they can join those calls.
Wow.
And once they join the community, it's a nominal fee. It's just a token fee, and then they can join those calls. And they also get a free workbook. And this workbook is to me, it's the real magic, because the workbook is a place where you write down your dreams, your goals, your fears. What do you want? Why do you want it? Your past successes, right? What have you done in the past that was successful? Well, I just created this trip and the speaking trip to England, right? So all I have to do is think about that. Now that's, you say that's just a memory, right? Doesn't mean anything. Well, yeah, it's a memory. What's a memory? Well, a memory is a connection, right? It's a connection between me right now and me on May 2nd in Bournemouth giving this talk. Well, I feel excited just thinking about it. So the energy that's coming through from that, what I call a past success, which is one of the worksheets in this workbook, that empowers us, right? So when you have a list of 25, 50, 75, 100 past successes, man, you feel great. You think, hey, I could do that, because I've done it before. I've done similar things before, right? So, so if you go, the workbook is free.
Cool.
And when people join the community, they don't have to join the community to get the workbook. They can get the workbook for free from my website. But if they join the community, they not only get the workbook, they also get a 10-part mind power course, and they get a 17-part online training course that shows them how to fill out the workbook and how to turn their goals into physical realities. So it's great. And then of course they can join the live calls and ask me questions about, what do I do now? I had this thought, but then I felt this way, and I have this goal, but I have this problem. What do I do with that?
Yeah. So are they, how long are the calls usually?
They're usually about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, because now we're kind of friends, right? There's a lot of people that have been on these calls for over a year. So sometimes we get into, just sort of kibitzing around. But generally speaking, I try and edit them down to about an hour. But if people have to leave, they can leave, if they want to. And the thing is, I upload them all to YouTube so they can watch the calls over and over.
Even if they couldn't be there. Yeah. That's so smart. Did you plan to do that? Was that a plan or a goal? You said 13 weeks. It was going to be 13 weeks.
Yes. Well, I've been thinking about, having an online community for a long time. But it was just a thought, and I didn't know how to do it,
Yeah.
And but I approached a friend of mine whose name is Jessica Colhart, and she's a Canadian podcaster, and she's just a great person, but she's good at connecting. She's written a few books, and she sells books, and she does speaking and coaching, and she does podcasting. So I approached her and I said, hey, how would you like to help me put together this online community? She said, yeah. So the two of us together kind of sparked each other, and it's, it started, I said, when would you like to begin? I remember this was Tuesday, the first Tuesday in January last year. So I said, yeah, I got this idea. I want to start this online community. Would you like to help me do it? So she said, yeah. So I said, oh, okay, great. When do you want to start? She said, what about Saturday? So I said, oh.
Wow.
I didn't think it was going to be that fast. So we started the first Saturday the first Saturday in January last year, 2022, and we've been going ever since.
So how did they find you? How did you find people? How did that process continue to grow?
Well, I do these things called podcast interviews, like this one, for
Oh,
example.
like this. Yes.
That's oftentimes the way people hear about me. But I have a mailing list, so I send people invitations, and I don't do much advertising, but I do, the odd Facebook post and things like that. You might have seen some.
Yeah.
And I'll say to people, hey, if you want to join in these Q&A calls and find out how to turn your thoughts into physical realities in your life, join my online community or buy my book.
Yeah. How many people do you have in your online community now? Do you know?
Not very many, I'll tell you. I thought I would have many more by now, but I have less than I thought I would, and I have a bunch of people that never show up on the calls.
Oh,
They join the community, they read my emails, they send me messages every once in a while and say, hey, I got a question, what about this and what about that? But for whatever reason, they don't have the time, or they just don't want to join the calls.
yeah.
So, but on the calls, typically there's, between 5 and 6 people, maybe. That's
Okay.
that's sort of average, right?
I was just wondering, because if there are people who want to be interactive and you have hundreds of people, it would be really hard to be able to give enough time for everybody to, participate,
When we
I
get to the
suppose.
point, yeah, when we get to the point where we have hundreds, then we'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, that's okay. And that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, but at the moment, it's just a few people. But it's
Yeah.
great, I mean, somebody reminded me one day, because I was talking to them and I said, gee, I wish I had more people on these calls, right? And they said, well, Jesus only had 12.
I know, right? I've thought of that
So
so
I
many
said,
times.
well, yeah, that's true. So I'm not doing so bad, right?
Well, here's what I had this thought this morning. So I don't do Facebook Live very often anymore, because I've got so many podcast interviews lately that have been so fun, that I used to do Facebook Lives when I was just kind of pondering something in my own mind, and then I'd put it out on Facebook Live, and then I'd take the audio and use that for a podcast interview. And today I just had this thought that occurred to me, so I put it out on Facebook. I don't think maybe it was 15 minutes. It wasn't terribly long, but it was the law of diffusion of innovation. Are you familiar with that bell curve?
But it sounds great. Yeah.
You would love it. So if you go back, I don't have to use this time to tell you about that, but it's on my Facebook post. And
Okay, I'll check it out.
the idea is that there's this bell curve where on the left side of the bell curve, the first little slice is 2.5% of any population, and 2.5% are the innovators of anything, whatever it might be. And then the next little slice is 13.5%. And those are the early adopters. Those are the people who see the idea, the innovation, and get it right away. The next little slice is 34%, and that's the early majority. The next slice is 34%, that's the late majority. And then the last slice is 16%, and that's the laggards. So if you think about that and what you're doing right now, you're the innovator, probably on the border of innovation and early adopter. Since you didn't really come up with all the ideas, you're now, they're ancient wisdom that we're both kind of tapping into. But in that space of 13,
some of it's modern. I mean, some of the quantum physics,
yeah,
that's modern. But I mean,
right,
it
sure,
relates to the old stuff, because I mean, in my mind, it's the same stuff that the ancient masters were talking about
yeah,
thousands of years ago. So
right,
because they're all talking about, not all of them, but they were talking about the mind, beliefs,
yep,
attitudes,
yep,
behavior, which hasn't changed. We're
right,
still people.
right, exactly. So that little slice of 13.5%, when you're saying, I wish there were more people, in the space of what you're exposing, teaching, demonstrating, I suppose, that's not very many people, 13.5%.
No, it's not. But the thing is, there's so much competition, right? I mean, what I started doing quite recently was putting well, first of all, I started with TikTok. I did a few TikTok videos,
You did? Okay.
and that was fun. And then YouTube came up with the same thing, because of course, in this technology space, as soon as one person thinks of something, the other people copy it, right? So
Right.
YouTube came up with this thing called shorts, right?
Uh-huh.
A YouTube short is 60 seconds.
Okay.
So I started posting these YouTube shorts on my website just before I went to England, I think,
Okay.
because I started off saying, hey, I'm going to show you how to achieve a goal here. So I have this thought about going to England. I'm going to go to England, and so I'm going to talk about that. So I did that for a couple of weeks before I went. And then I made a few of them when I was in England. I don't think I posted them on YouTube when I was in England. But then when I came back, I've been doing that now on a regular basis. And some of those things have like 500 views.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a 1-minute video. I put up one every day, and, I might have 3,000 people in a week. Well, not that many, but maybe a couple thousand people a week following
Yeah.
those calls. So some of those are joining my mailing list. So some of those are getting my workbook, and some of those are getting my invitations to watch my
Yeah.
YouTube videos and things. And some of them may end up on joining my online community, right? But the thing is that the benefits to me personally of doing this are immeasurable,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives me an opportunity to talk to people and get feedback and find out where they're having trouble understanding, what I'm talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
how to explain it better. Like, for example, this morning, I was just thinking about you and your paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, what I did was very similar. I painted this trip to the UK and this
Mm-hmm.
speaking thing in Bournemouth, right? So that's literally a creation of my mind. That's what happened, right? Now, of course, other people were involved, but then again, other people are involved in your paintings too. Like, you don't make the paints, right?
Right.
Somebody else makes those. You don't make the canvas.
Right.
Somebody else does
Right.
that, right? You don't make
Right.
the brushes. No.
No.
So
Yeah. You're right.
so for anything that we do, it involves a whole bunch of other people's
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. 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 You're so right about that. When I try to create, no, when I try to copy somebody else's, painting, or I look at something and even a landscape or a flower or something, it never looks the way it does in real life, because that's not my gift to create reality. Mine is more about imagination. And as you've said, it comes through me onto the canvas. And when I allow that to happen, I'm as equally as amazed by what shows up on the canvas as
Absolutely.
anybody else. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, this to me is one of the most important things that I learned is that I can create things, right? Like, I
Mm,
never thought of myself as a creative person, because
yeah.
I thought, well, I can't play a musical instrument, I can't
Yeah.
dance, I can't sing, I can't draw, I can't. And it was
Right.
only when I was about halfway through writing my book, Mind, Time, and Power, that I realized, hey, I'm actually creating something here.
Mhm.
So I was a late bloomer in terms of realizing that I'm creative,
Mm.
Um, but it's
That's
just it's like everything else. It's an attitude, it's
yeah.
about yourself and your world.
And I like what you said earlier about how you said, I think about May 2nd, and I still feel that exhilaration about what happened in England. And that's what it is. It's about how I can keep my vibrational energy high so that I can attract to myself who I am, not what I want. And all of that I've been saying those words for a long time, for probably years, since I've been starting to study this, but it's only been way more recently that I actually understand, not just in my head, but throughout my whole awareness, that this stuff really does work.
Oh, absolutely. And the understanding is the hard part.
Yeah.
And lots of times trying to understand it slows us down,
Yeah.
because if we're not clear about what it is that we want, then lots of times we won't take any action, because
Mhm.
we don't know exactly what we're doing, right? So
Yeah.
there's a real skill, and there's a real art to doing what Dean Graziosi calls taking imperfect action.
Yeah.
Just starting, like when you paint a picture, when you do one of your paintings, I mean, you begin, you have an idea,
Hmm.
and you get partway through and you may change it. You may
Hmm.
decide to do something else. And even if you end up painting exactly what you want, you look at it and you know, oftentimes you'll think, well, that's not really what I was trying to do.
Mm.
But so what? I mean, I can say that about anything, right?
Mhm.
Like, you know, going to the store and buying a loaf of bread. Oh, I bought this loaf of bread, but actually it was more expensive than I wanted to pay. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't what I actually was visualizing, you know, or
yeah.
maybe it's a little stale.
Mm.
No, I'll tell you a funny story. When one of the things I wanted to do when I went to England was I wanted to visit the house that I was born in, right?
Mm.
Because I was born in England,
Mm-hmm.
in a place called Bedford, right? Well, I
Yeah.
happen to have a friend in Bedford. He's kind of a pen pal of mine, and I met him through my book, right?
Oh, cool.
Because he bought my book and he wrote to me
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, I love your book," and you know, so we've been
Mm.
friends online for a number
Yeah.
of years, right? And so anytime that I fill out any kind of information, you know, they say, "What's your name? What's your birthday? Where were you born?" You know, I always write Bedford because that's where I was born, right? So
Right.
I had this strong connection to Bedford, even though I'd never been there, right? Because I left there when I
Okay.
was 18 years old.
Right.
You know, my parents moved to Canada, right, with
Yeah.
me and my two older brothers.
Yeah.
So all that I knew was my parents lived on Grange Road in Ampthill, which is close to Bedford, or maybe even a part of Bedford. So I asked my two older brothers, you know, I said, "Do you remember the address?" You know, and both of them said, "Yeah, as far as I know, it's 34 Grange Road,
Wow.
Ampthill." So I said, "Okay, I'll go there." So when I went to England, my friend in Bedford, I visited him and I said, "Can you take me to 34 Grange Road in Ampthill?" He said, "Yeah." So we went there one day, right?
Wow.
So I went to this place, knocked on the door, you know, introduced myself to the person who owns the house, said, "Hey, I was born in this house, you know, 76 years ago now."
Yeah.
And so we were talking. I got some pictures, you know, ta-da, another goal reached, you know, another
Yeah.
fantasy created as a physical reality in my life, right?
Yeah.
And so I come back home and, you know, about a week ago, my brother says, "Hey, I double checked my birth certificate and it wasn't 34 Grange Road, it was 35 Grange Road."
No. Oh my
So I
gosh.
said, "Oh no, you ruined my whole trip," you know. But of course, that's what happens, right? Like when you
Yeah.
create something, it doesn't matter what it is. You know, talk to any film director, any actor, you know, like lots of times they will say, "I hate to look at my old movies because
Yeah.
it just makes me feel embarrassed. I did such a lousy acting job, you
Mm.
know. I
Mm.
never watched my old thing." So there's always that element that when you create something, it's never exactly what you think it is.
Right. Right.
But
And
with practice,
it
it gets
also
pretty close, you know.
practice. Exactly. And it shows you how far you've come. And I think I read a book just recently called The Gap and the Gain by,
Right.
do you know that one? Benjamin Hardy and
I
Dan
know the
Sullivan.
book. I haven't read it, but I know Benjamin Hardy. I'm a big fan of his online.
Yeah. So you'll understand the book. It's a very simple concept. High achievers typically measure their success in gap thinking, which is how far they still have to go because they're measuring against an unrealistic expectation.
Right.
So they're always, their energy is always, I'm never enough, I'm never good enough, I'm never making it. Where if we did this instead, looking backward at the gain, how far we've come, we would be of a different mindset and a different vibrational energy. And we
Oh,
would be in
absolutely.
celebration mode.
Absolutely. And that's the trick, you know, is to figure out how to think about something so that we feel good about it.
Yeah, right. That's the
Dean
only goal, isn't
Graziosi,
it?
what's that?
That's the only goal, isn't it? To just feel good.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. You know, that's what we all want, right?
Yeah.
And so when Dean Graziosi, who I've talked about a couple times, he's
Yep.
a partner with Anthony Robbins
Yep.
in this website where I'm hosting some of my online courses.
Hmm.
He says the only person you should compare yourself to is the you that used to be.
Yep.
And if you're better, if you're smarter, if you're quicker, if you're, you know, if you're
Right.
healthier, then you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because what we often do without thinking, again, it's unconscious, you know, we compare ourselves to other people. And if,
Mhm.
naturally we compare ourselves to somebody who can paint better than me, who can dance better
Mhm.
than me, who has more followers than me, and all that does is make us feel bad.
Right, right, right. And if the only goal is to make us feel good, why would we keep comparing to others and looking at what's wrong? It's
Because
a
it's a
very simple shift, not easy always, but very simple.
yeah. But the trick is to be aware of it. You see, once you know
Yeah,
you're doing that, then you can change.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I have a course on Anthony Robbins' new website. It's called the Confidence Switch.
Confidence switch.
It's
Okay.
just a little switch in your mind that when you flip it, you feel confident.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you
Simple.
know that, once you know what it is, then you can feel confident instantly, right? But if you don't know that little switch, if you don't know it's there, then you can mope around going, oh, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, right.
But
So you mentioned earlier about you mentioned something about the theory of everything, and you said that on the small level it's quantum, and on the big level it's relativity. And you said the missing link in the middle is consciousness. Is there a distinction in your mind between consciousness and awareness?
well, yeah, consciousness to me is everything. It's
Okay.
like the universe of my mind, right?
Okay.
That's my consciousness. You can call it my soul,
Mm.
my essence, perhaps, right? But awareness is what I'm aware of. You see, right now I'm aware of you because I'm looking at your picture on my screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I turn around and leave the room, then I'm not aware of you anymore. I mean, maybe I'm thinking of you, but I'm not picking up information from you. So to my mind, my awareness is the focus of my
Oh, okay.
consciousness, right? I
Got
think
it.
of it like, you take a magnifying glass and you focus the sun onto a
Yeah.
point. So that point, that's my awareness.
Okay. I love that. So I hear that as consciousness is possibility and awareness is reality, maybe.
Well, no,
Because
reality is well, it depends. I mean, reality would, if we talk physical reality, right?
yeah.
Um, when I went to Bournemouth to do my talk,
Hmm.
I first had the thought in November. I met the person in December online who invited me to talk in Bournemouth.
Hmm.
So that changed the quality of that thought from a fantasy or a possibility into like, oh, hey, this is actually starting to happen now, right? Then
Hmm.
it became very exciting. Whereas before it was like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to
Hmm.
happen? Is it possible?
Hmm.
Is it impossible? I was confused about it. Am I able to do this? Well, once that lady said yes, then it was like, oh, okay, now it's happening, right?
Hmm.
So, but it was what the scientists call a virtual reality. It wasn't real,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
It was only real, physically real. It was only physically real for a couple of hours on May 2nd when I was giving that presentation, right?
Right. 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 Sure.
Now, after that, it's not physically real anymore. The people that were in that audience, they're not there anymore. If
Yeah.
you go to that place that we did that talk, there's nobody there now,
Yeah.
probably. They're
Right.
gone. So that physical event, that physical reality, right? It only existed
Mm.
for about 3 hours.
Hmm.
Before that, it was a virtual reality, and after it was a virtual reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the virtual reality before, I would call that an idea, a goal, a wish, an intention, right?
Yeah.
Afterwards, I call it a memory,
Memory. Hmm.
right? But it's still a virtual reality. And this is what quantum physics says, that these virtual particles, they say every physical particle is surrounded by a whole sea, a whole cloud of what they call virtual particles.
Hmm.
Well, a virtual particle is a particle that's not physically real,
Mm.
but they can
Mm.
measure it. They can measure the effect of it. In
Yeah.
other words, it has a kind of an energy to it. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying a goal is, like when I started when that woman invited me to talk, when she said, okay, we'd like to have you come here on May 2nd,
Hmm.
boom, that changed.
Mm.
Suddenly I didn't feel, ooh, can I do this? Is this real?
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to happen? Is this possible? Suddenly it was, hey, this is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got excited. The energy changed, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the energy is real. Like they say in the East, if you're walking in the woods and you see a stick on the ground and you think it's a snake, the fear is real,
Mm-hmm.
even though the snake isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's the physical reality and there's the non-physical reality. The physical reality, it only exists for a short time, but the non-physical reality, it has energy that you can pick up before and you can pick it up afterwards.
Yeah. So do you think, in that vein, then, I'm thinking about all of the angst that people are feeling in the world these days, all of the mental, we call it mental illness, but I'm not really sure what it is. All of the anxiety and the trauma and the things that people have unresolved in them. It feels like this could be maybe not fixed or dissolved, but there's something here to understanding what you just said about virtual reality surrounding reality and all of the things that you're saying in a way that makes it understandable to people.
Well, that's my intention. That's the reason I'm doing all this, is to try and get people to realize, hey, the way you feel is because of how you think about something. If you look at a number on the ground, you say, oh, that's a 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you walk around the other side, oh, it's a 9 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we confuse lots of times, I mentioned this in my book too, the biggest challenge we have is to be able to distinguish what's real from what's not real. So the fear may be real, but it comes from the belief that you just saw a snake. If you realize, oh, it's not a snake, it's a stick, then the fear goes away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the anxiety that people have, I believe, it's number one, a habit. You just feel that way because you've learned to feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it comes from the way you look at things. If you can change the way you look at something, then you feel differently about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the anxiety that people have is just a habit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, I'm so glad. Go ahead.
It can be tricky to change, right? I mean, if you have a habit of feeling bad about yourself,
Yeah.
if you think, I'm not good enough, if that's one of your programs, right? Well, that can be hard to change. I mean, all of us, I'm assuming, using me as an example, when I was young, I stuttered, I stammered, I had low self-esteem, I was shy, I was afraid, I would never speak in public ever.
Wow.
Somebody asked me to say something in class. I remember one time the teacher asked me to read something in class and I refused and I got in trouble for it
Mm-hmm.
because I was so afraid of speaking. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now you can't shut me up,
Right. And on that note, we could talk forever, and we will continue this conversation. For right now, we have to end it at some point here. But I just need you to know how much I appreciate you reaching out and saying, hey, I have something else I want to share. That's what we're up to when we are co-creators in the awareness realm. And
right.
I'm almost going to say co-allowers, because in some way there's something I'm working on allowing to come through me instead of feeling like I need to have it figured out before I open my mouth or put
That's right.
paint
That's
on
exactly
canvas.
right. That's exactly right. And this workbook, that I talk about, and I hope everybody that hears this goes to mindtimeandpower.com and signs up to get this free workbook, because to me,
Yeah.
that's the real secret of all of this,
Yeah.
is working with your thoughts and writing them down and thinking about them. That's the key. But when I first started working in the workbook, one of the worksheets says, what are your dreams? This is what I call your master dream list, right? What are your dreams? Well, when I first started working in that workbook, I thought, what's the point of this? Oh, I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want to travel the world. I want people to like me. I want to have the perfect relationship. What's the point of writing that stuff down, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was, after about 30 days of doing this, and I made a commitment that I was going to work on the workbook every day for at least a minute. Well, after about 30 days of doing that, then I realized, hey, wait a second, I'm not just painting fantasies here. I'm choosing what possibilities I want in my life.
Mm.
It was the same thing when I went to England, right? Once I made the decision to go to England and I realized, okay, I'm going to be in Bournemouth on this day. I'm going to be in Bedford on this day. I'm going to be in London on, for this, these days, right? Then suddenly it was like, oh, okay, well, what do I want to do? Well, I want to go to Buckingham Palace. I want to go to Kensington Palace. I want to go to St. Paul's Cathedral, right? I want to take a boat ride on the Thames.
Yeah.
Those were dreams too, but I was choosing what I was going to allow into my life, right? So this shift that you just mentioned, shifting to allowing, I'm allowing this to happen. What would I like to happen in my life? I'm going to let it in, I'm going to let in more luck. I'm going to let in more confidence. I'm going to let in a better relationship. Once you start allowing, look out, because the chances are it's going to show up.
So good. So good. Anthony, thank you so much for reaching out again. I will make sure I put in show notes your mindtimeandpower.com so people can have access to that and to the free workbook and to joining your Saturday calls if they want to. This is just the beginning for us. I think there's something else for us to do together, whether it's in person or virtually. So watch for more on that too, details.
Yeah, well, let me thank you too, because I mean, when I send you a message a week or two ago and said, hey, do you want to get back together again online? You said yes.
I always will say yes to you, Anthony.
I appreciate you saying, oh, thanks for reaching out to me, but obviously thanks for you accepting my invitation. I invited myself on this call with you, right?
No, this is awesome. This is so great. So everybody who's listening, take some action toward what you do want in your life, because it's just there waiting for you. Anthony just gave us so many great things to think about. That's what it means to me to get real. So get real, everybody. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Jody.
Don't hang up. Don't hang up yet. I'm just going to stop recording if I could figure out how to do that. There we go. Record. Stop recording. Okay. Stop.